Hello Year 11 and some of Year 10, because I am recording this the week before the Year 10 mock. Today I am doing paper 1 question 4, which is the evaluation question on the AQA fiction paper. Okay, so this question is essentially a language and structure question. The thing about structure is it will always ask you to look at a section of the text, and because of that it can be hard to talk about structure. Essentially you're using the same skills as you are with language, but you're evaluating, and the key difference here is that you are looking at statement and you're showing all of these kind of skills, which are these kind of squid skills, but you're relating them back to a statement. So typically your question will look something like this. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source in paragraphs 3 and 4. So it will tell you where to focus on. Your first job before you do anything else is get a pen. By now you've answered all the other reading questions. Scribble out anything except, or just do a couple of lines where I don't need to scribble in detail, except the paragraphs they're telling you to look at. Because if you try to quote from anything except the paragraphs they're telling you to look at, they won't give you any marks. So make sure you know, or draw a circle around the paragraphs you're meant to look at. Once you know that, look at the question again. A student wrote, this part of the extract shows that the writer feels like an outsider that does not belong. To what extent do you agree? In your response you could consider your own impressions of how the writer shows feelings of being an outsider, how the writer creates this idea of her being an outsider. Support your response with references to the text. Those bullet points, they say you could, but really they're almost like a plan of what you're supposed to do, because what they want you to do is evaluate. They want you to test a hypothesis. If you think about maybe in science or in history or in geography, sometimes you will get a theory and then you'll get a case study or the results of an experiment, and you will have to match them together and see how the reality backs up the statement that has been made. It is that same skill. You're looking at the reality of the situation and you're looking at a statement. Here is your statement, and in here the statement is that the writer feels like an outsider and someone who doesn't belong. Okay? You highlight those things and you keep them in mind, and then you go back to your paragraphs and you start looking for evidence that agrees with the statement. They are never going to give you a confusing statement. They are always going to give you a statement that you can, to a large extent, agree with. Now, the reason for this is that they don't actually want to know whether you agree or disagree. What they want to know is whether you can select the evidence and then explain how it matches the statement. That's what they're after. They take it for granted that you will agree. They take it for granted that you will be able to more or less identify that this is true. What they're looking for is that you can pull out the correct quotes and that you can explain the methods that are used and the keywords that are used, and say how, so you've got this word how, the writer has got this message across. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go forward to, I've pulled out paragraphs 3 and 4 for you. I'll explain a little bit about them and you can pause the video and read them. So this is from an autobiography of a famous presenter called Floella Benjamin. Floella Benjamin, she immigrated into the UK, and when she first came to the UK, she faced racism and prejudice, and then after that she became a household name. She became very famous in the 1980s. So this is her autobiography, and this is an account of when she started school. And so if you pause and read through, you'll notice that I have highlighted some things in red, and I'll explain what they are. Those are the bits which I think would be good to quote, and you'll notice that the whole thing isn't red. I've just picked some really good examples. So if you pause and you read, okay, and unpause. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time pausing the video and reading. Now, yeah, you might notice that out of all of these paragraphs, I haven't actually highlighted huge amounts, and there's a reason for that. you get marks in the mark scheme for the judicious choice of quotes. Judicious means well judged. If you go dropping in every single quote, you're not being choosy, you're not being judicious. They want you to choose maybe 4, maybe 5, even for a 20-mark question, even for a longer question, only 4 or 5 quotes. If you think about how you do it in English literature, if you're writing like a long essay that's worth 30 marks, you don't quote the whole book. You've only learned a certain number off by heart. Yeah, you don't need that. So apply that kind of thinking to the English language here. You don't need hundreds of quotes. For 20 marks, you need maybe 4 quotes, maybe 5. You don't need a huge amount, but they have to be the right quotes. Now, I went through and I highlighted in red sentences where I could very clearly say, yes, they mean she's an outsider, and here's why. So I've got this first one, I felt like a fish out of water. That's obvious. It's a simile, so you've got a method. That's an element of the how. You could talk about how it's a cliche that anyone can understand, so the reader can feel sympathy for her because she's talking about how she wasn't understood. And yet the way she's explaining it is using such a cliche, such a well-known simile, that we can tell that she's really good at making herself understood. And so therefore, we feel she's an outsider, and furthermore, we feel sorry for her and feel that the teacher was being unfair. And that's the key to getting your high grade. You put in your method and you push your inference a little bit further. You kind of say, yes, and there's this added emotional response, or yes, and this links to another place in the text. Okay, another thing that I picked up on that was about feeling like an outsider is repetition. She repeats first and first. I didn't understand at first, the first time I saw children play it, talking about lack of understanding and repeating this idea of first. And that pushes forward the idea of newness. So she doesn't fit in because she is new. So again, I'm saying, yes, she's an outsider who doesn't fit in. Furthermore, this is because she is new, because she has not been seen before and people feel what they don't know. Yes, so I'm adding something to it. You've got spat strange words at me. So you've got spat and strange. I would link back to this and I'd talk about, talking about the idea that people fear her because she is new. This is prejudice. Yeah, this is what the reader can infer is racism. And the way that people talk to her, spat, strange, sibilance, it's also spat is onomatopoeia, and strange words. So the swear words that they used towards her are never said. There's euphemism, so that's another method. She doesn't want to say them. They're so unpleasant, they're so racist, they're swear words, and she doesn't want to say them. She doesn't want to expose the reader to them because they're too distressing. So again, you're saying she feels like an outsider, she's feeling like she doesn't fit in, and her experience was so distressing that she's using the sibilants to talk about them spitting at her, that the words, she doesn't say them out and out, she uses euphemism because they're so offensive and upsetting. You could dig quite a lot into that and say, yes, and this is why, and we can infer that it was very distressing for her and that these people were racist and being deliberately so. They were words which told me that I was different from them and that they felt my kind shouldn't be in their country. So you've got a lot of key words, the idea of different, and the idea of her being told that she was different. Now you'll notice she doesn't say, I was different. She says, I was told. So that key word, told. And we as readers are meant to think, actually you felt like you were being told you were different, but we don't think you're different. We think that those people were exhibiting prejudice. And then this kind of they felt, again, it's like told and they felt. The prejudice is all there with the other people. Now in this bit, she's talking to Marmee, and Marmee is explaining. Well, Marmee is close to her and explaining things to her. In this section, she does not feel like an outsider talking to someone about experiences. It's in the playground. So you've got to be really particular and judicious. If you started talking about Marmee, the examiner would say, is that the best quote? Because clearly she doesn't feel like an outsider to Marmee. In fact, she didn't want Marmee to leave her in Trinidad. So down here is the next bit, and you could talk about the structure, because this is the very end of the extract. So you could talk about structure here, which is almost like a topic sentence. It sums up how and why she feels different. That was the day I realized that in the eyes of some people in the world, I was not a person but a colour. So here, she's kind of almost setting up a metaphor for us. I was not a person but a colour, but again, she's saying that it's in the eyes of some people. So she is making it very clear. She's implying that the reason for her being an outsider is not because she actually was a different human being, completely different from them. It was because they had shut her out. Yeah? So her agenda, so the writer's agenda, her position on it is, yes, I felt like an outsider. Yes, I felt I didn't fit in. However, this wasn't because I was actually very, very different. I mean, I could do the work and everything. I knew what a playground was. It was that some people had racist attitudes and wouldn't open their eyes to me. So you can see there, you don't pick every single thing, and you do agree, but you add stuff. So you would say, yes, she's an outsider. Furthermore, there is evidence this is because of racism. Yeah. Yes, she's an outsider. However, she relates to the reader very clearly, so we can see this is not fair. So this is a kind of 6-step process down here, and this is quite useful. Think about what you're agreeing to. Do agree. Think about who or what you are focusing on. That immediately cuts out anything that isn't about whoever you're focusing on. Yeah? What are the key words? So look out for your key, most powerful quotes and limit it to 4 or 5. 4 detailed paragraphs will get you much higher marks than 8 2-sentence paragraphs. They'd rather have you say yes, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing. 2 methods, 4 ideas about 1 quote than they would if you just mechanically go quote, idea, quote, idea, quote, idea. Only limit yourself to a small number. Say what they suggest, yeah? What evidence is there? So all of this is about picking out those key short words. And how does the evidence prove my statement? Yeah, how? What methods are used? What is the thought process going through the writer's head? What do they want us to think? Yeah? And this is my top tip, really, that the stuff you've written about structure and the stuff you've written about language, if those quotes back up the statement, and if you can make them fit, you can reuse your thinking. Yeah, you're allowed to reuse the same quotes and the same methods, so long as it links to the task. Yeah? So if you already found an amazing simile or an amazing piece of structure like a cliffhanger ending, and it happens to match up with that statement you're given, use it again. Yeah? They want you just to use this kind of squid paragraph format. Some schools might call it PEE, we call it squid. They want you to dig deeper. They want you to basically look at writing methods and why the writer used them. And they want you to agree, but add something. Yes, and another point. Yes, however. Yes, furthermore, this links to. Right, so I hope that's helpful. It is a 20-mark question, but I would say writing 4 or 5 paragraphs is fine. And the most important thing is to be choosy with your quotes. Find ones with powerful keywords and powerful evidence, and say how and why. Do squid paragraphs. Good luck. We'll go on to the creative writing and a few other questions next week and over Easter.